They say that only in America could something like this happen. Well, we gonna have to politely disagree with that one, because today we'll be telling you about the bat bomb, a story of how American researchers equipped thousands of bats with miniature incendiary bombs and then unleashed them over the forests of Tennessee. And if that sounds absolutely crazy, just wait until you see what happened next, because let's just say that it might have just been the most disastrous plan ever conceived by the US military. So stay tuned and get ready for some serious explosions. This is the incredible story of the bat bomb. The year was 1943 and the United States had a bit of a problem. They were at war with Japan and Germany and neither side could get the upper hand. For years, there had been deadlock after deadlock, but the Allies were growing tired of this, especially the Americans. The British had already started to use incendiary weapons against Germany, and were getting decent results from their efforts. But America was unsure. What if the firebombs would end up burning too much of their own infrastructure? But one day, a light bulb went off above someone's head, and that was enough for the US military to finally greenlight the project. But before we go into this whole story of how American scientists tried to use bats to fight World War II, first, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button down below. It really helps out the channel and means we can keep making videos just like this one. Thanks so much. And now let's go back to the wacky world of the bat bomb. As you can probably imagine, the firebombing of Germany was a massive undertaking. The bombers had to fly deep into enemy territory and every mission carried a high risk of loss. But that's where the idea came in. Why not let nature do the work for them? Scientists had been researching the possibility of using insects and animals as weapons for some time. They called it Project X-ray. In fact, they even considered turning rats into kamikaze bombers. But there was another animal that caught their attention. An animal that was abundant in America and German, bats. It was decided that these flying mammals would be ideal for the task. Not only were they small, which made them easy to handle, but they also flew long distances every night in search of food. This meant that they could potentially drop incendiary devices on multiple targets. But here's the thing, scientists were fairly confident that they could make these bombs. But they weren't sure how accurate the bats would be when dropping them. And accuracy was everything when it came to firebombs. So they needed to run tests and they needed to do it fast. Their plan was simple. They would equip each bat with a small incendiary device attached to its leg and then release them near major cities. Then all they would have to do was sit back and watch as the bombs did their job. Now, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, how could those little creatures actually set anything on fire? And that's a great question. That's because these bombs didn't explode. Instead, they emitted intense heat and flames. In order to attach these incendiary devices to the bat's legs, scientists had to perform surgery on the poor creatures. And it wasn't just any kind of surgery. They had to cut open the tendons of the bat's ankles so that the bomb would be held in place while it was mid-air. Can you imagine the uproar if this was done today? Of course it was. The scientists also had to remove a piece of the bone in the bat's ankle and sew it back together. We're pretty sure the animal rights activists would have a field day with this one. The next step was to attach the bomb itself. It was designed to be as lightweight as possible, consisting of a small vial filled with thermite, a highly flammable mixture of powdered metal and sand. The vial was then sealed and attached to the bat's leg with rubber bands. Once it was in place, the bat was ready for deployment, but the scientists wanted to ensure the bomb would fall from the bat's leg when it landed. To do this, they rigged the bombs so that the weight of the bat would pull on a string and release the bomb once it landed. It was a genius design. Unfortunately, it didn't always work correctly. One scientist was quoted as saying, "When a bat carrying a white phosphorus bomb alights, the bomb falls to the ground, rolls over, strikes a match, ignites and explodes. If he's lucky, he may be blown clear. If not, he is cooked like a French fried potato." And as funny as that quote is, the experiments soon got out of hand. In fact, the scientists quickly realized that they had created a monster. You see, during testing, several bombs exploded accidentally, causing major damage to the laboratory. The solution: stop testing in the lab and move the trials to the forest. The perfect place to test out a new incendiary weapon. It was here that things took a turn for the worse. There were 3 separate test runs and each one was more disastrous than the last. During the first attempt, 60 bombs were dropped and 22 of them failed to separate from the bats. This caused several fires to break out in the forest, but nothing too serious. However, the second test run was much different. This time, 1,000 bombs were dropped and 70% of them failed to separate properly. The forest was engulfed in flames, and the scientists had to abandon their equipment and run for the hills. Now, you're probably thinking this has to be it, right? Surely they wouldn't be crazy enough to do a third test. Well, you'd be wrong. It was time for the ultimate test. 3,000 bombs were dropped and it was absolute pandemonium. Fires raged across the forest and the scientists watched in horror as their own base was consumed by flames. As if things couldn't get any worse, rain began to pour down, which helped spread the fire even further. One of the scientists later recalled the scene saying, "The forest floor was a mass of burning resin and flaming resin-soaked leaves. As the bombs exploded, they showered red-hot sparks over the area. Trees immediately burst into flames. There was nothing we could do but stand there and watch our handiwork." It was at this point that the team realized they had created something truly terrifying. The bombs were supposed to burn out after a few seconds, but instead they continued to emit flames for over 15 minutes. It was also discovered that the heat from the bombs was strong enough to ignite dry leaves and grass from as far as 50 feet away. And the worst part was that they had no idea how long the fires would burn for or how much damage they would cause. After the third test, the scientists packed up their things and headed home. They had learned a valuable lesson and it wasn't going to be repeated. But this wasn't the end of the story, because the fires they had started continued to burn for days. Local firefighters were called in to help put out the blaze, but even they were shocked by what they saw. It was obvious that this wasn't your typical forest fire. The flames were too intense and the area was too large. It took almost a week for the firefighters to get the situation under control. But by then, the damage was already done. Large swaths of forest had been burnt to a crisp, and wildlife had been lost forever. To this day, no one knows exactly how much damage was done to the forest. But some experts believe it would take decades for the ecosystem to recover. In the end, the bat bomb was never used in combat, and the US military kept the project top secret for many years. It wasn't until decades later that the truth finally came out. But why, you might ask? Why did they keep it a secret for so long? Well, it's likely that they were embarrassed by the failure of the project. After all, they had spent thousands of dollars and countless hours trying to develop this incendiary weapon, and it had failed miserably. But maybe they knew deep down that it was a bad idea from the start. Using innocent animals as weapons of war is never a good idea, and the fact that they had to perform surgery on these poor creatures was just unconscionable. Whatever the reason, the bat bomb remains one of the most bizarre and controversial experiments of all time. It's a reminder of the lengths that scientists will go to in the name of progress and the importance of always considering the consequences of our actions. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other content where we bring you the craziest and most unbelievable stories from history.